Right now, sitting exactly where you are, something is moving through you that you cannot feel and will never feel. There is sugar traveling in your blood this very second, folded in among everything else, rushing through those rivers under your skin, drifting the way a barge drifts down a wide, slow channel, patient, unhurried, waiting for the next simple decision your body needs to make with it. You cannot sense it. There is no tingle, no pressure, nothing at all to tell you it is there. And here's the small piece of magic I want to show you today. The moment you decide to push yourself up out of that chair, the moment you take even 3 or 4 ordinary steps toward the kitchen or the mailbox, something opens inside the muscles of your legs that you will never see and never feel either. Thousands and thousands of tiny doors, so small and so numerous that a single muscle cell holds a great many of them tucked inside it, slide open all at once and begin quietly pulling that drifting sugar in off the current and putting it straight to work. There is no injection involved, no medicine, and not one flicker of conscious thought from you. Just walking. By the time we are finished today, I promise you, a slow walk after dinner is going to look like one of the more astonishing things your body knows how to do without ever asking your permission. None of this is meant to alarm you, and there is nothing here for you to go and do. I only want to show you what is happening, right under your skin, the next time you simply stand up and walk across a room. So let me show you exactly what just happened, and where that sugar you are quietly carrying around actually goes once it leaves your blood. Most people have heard a little about blood sugar somewhere along the way. They have heard the word insulin, maybe from a doctor, maybe from a worried relative, maybe from the label on a box, and they leave it sitting there in their mind as this vague, faintly frightening cloud they would rather not look at too closely. I want to take that cloud apart for you today, piece by piece, the way I like to do with these things, and show you there is a second door into your muscle that almost nobody ever hears about. A door that swings open for a reason far older and far simpler than any hormone circulating through your blood. Let's start, though, with the door everybody has at least heard of, because you need it in place before the real surprise makes any sense. Think back to the last real meal you sat down to enjoy. Somewhere in that plate was food your body could break apart into sugar, and once that food reached your stomach and your gut went to work pulling it apart, sugar began climbing in your blood, rising steadily for perhaps an hour or so after you set down your fork. Your body noticed that rise almost the instant it began. Tucked behind your stomach, about the size and shape of a small flattened pear, sits an organ called the pancreas. And the pancreas is, among its other jobs, a kind of watchman standing quietly at a gate. It feels that sugar rising in the blood passing through it, and it responds the only way it knows how, by pouring a hormone out into your bloodstream called insulin. You have almost certainly heard this word before, maybe more times than you ever wanted to. Think of insulin as a key, cut for one very particular lock, and I mean that almost literally rather than as a figure of speech. It travels through your blood, riding along in that same slow current until it reaches a muscle cell and knocks. Sitting right there on the surface of that muscle cell is a receptor shaped to fit insulin the way a lock is shaped to fit its key, and when that key finally turns, the muscle receives a very particular instruction. Open your doors. Let the sugar in. Now here's the part I want you to really sit with for a moment because it surprises nearly everyone I have ever explained it to. When people picture where the sugar from a meal actually goes, they usually picture fat, because that is the word we hear most, the word so many of us carry around as a quiet worry. But the truth of it is almost the opposite of what you would guess. Muscle is the single biggest customer for that sugar in your entire body, not fat. Not even your brain, though your brain does take its own modest, steady share around the clock. Muscle? A larger share of that sugar gets claimed by your muscles than by anything else in your body, simply because you are carrying so much of it, wrapped around your bones from your shoulders down to your ankles, mile after mile of fiber, and every bit of it is hungry for fuel. Picture your muscle for a moment, not as something decorative, not as something you flex in a mirror, but as a vast, quiet reservoir spread the length of your whole body, sitting there with its doors ready, waiting for its share to arrive. Once those doors open and the sugar streams in, the muscle does one of two things with it. Some gets burned immediately, right there on the spot, spent on whatever small task the muscle happens to be doing in that moment, holding a coffee cup, climbing a step, simply keeping you upright. And some of it gets tucked away, chained together link by link into a dense little bundle called glycogen, which you can think of as the muscle's own private pantry, a reserve of fuel folded up small and stored inside the cell for later for the next set of stairs, the next long afternoon on your feet, the next morning before breakfast. Insulin is the knock at the door. Your muscle is the customer answering it. and the pantry is where the leftovers quietly go, shelved and waiting. That is the familiar half of the story, the half that shows up in commercials and doctor's office pamphlets and the little diagrams taped to the wall of an exam room. Most people stop right there and believe that is the whole picture. It never was, but it is not the whole picture, not even close. And this is where I want to slow down, because what I'm about to show you is, to me, one of the most quietly astonishing things tucked inside the entire human body. There is a second way sugar gets into your muscle, a completely separate way in, opened by a completely separate signal, and it needs no insulin at all, none whatsoever. You could, in theory, have almost no insulin knocking on the door in that moment, and this second door would still swing wide open because it does not answer to a hormone traveling patiently through the blood. It answers to something far more immediate, far more physical. It answers to the muscle simply working, contracting, moving. The instant a muscle fiber contracts, the instant you push yourself up out of that chair or take those first few steps across the kitchen floor toward the coffee pot, the muscle itself, acting entirely on its own authority, sends the very same doors sliding open. No knock required, no permission asked of anyone. Scientists gave these little doors a name, almost a kind of serial number. And I will tell you once because it helps to have a word for the thing we are talking about for the rest of our time together. They are called GLUT4. Say it however feels natural to you. GLUT4, the body's own private label stamped on these small sugar doors. After today, I will simply call them the doors, because that is really all you need to carry with you when you walk away from this. What matters is not the name printed on a research paper somewhere. What matters is that movement itself, the plain ordinary act of a muscle contracting, is its own separate key, arriving at its own separate lock, needing nothing at all from insulin, no hormone, no permission granted from anywhere else in the body. I want you to really feel the size of that fact, because it is easy to let a sentence like that slide right past you without noticing what it actually means. For a long stretch of the last century, this sat as one of the genuine puzzles inside human physiology. Researchers kept watching muscle pull sugar in during exercise even in situations where insulin was barely present in the blood at all. Hardly a trace of the key anywhere near the lock, and for years nobody could fully explain how the sugar was still getting through those doors. Eventually, piece by piece, in laboratories full of patient people running experiments on working muscle, they found it. A working muscle has its own way in, built and wired long before insulin ever entered the story of your body. It does not have to wait for the watchman behind your stomach to notice anything happening in the blood. It does not have to wait for a hormone to travel the long, slow road through your circulation and knock politely on the door. The muscle simply decides, by moving, that it needs fuel right now, and it lets itself in. So let me take you down to where this actually happens, right at the level of a single cell, because it is one of the more beautiful pieces of quiet machinery tucked away inside you. Most of the time, these doors, these GLUT4 doors we just named, are not sitting out on the surface of the muscle cell at all, ready and exposed. They are folded away deep inside, tucked into tiny pouches just beneath the outer wall of the cell, held in reserve the way a good set of tools might be kept closed up in a drawer rather than left scattered out on a workbench. A resting muscle, one that is simply sitting quietly while you read the paper or watch the evening news, keeps most of its doors tucked away exactly like that, folded and waiting. Because in that resting moment, it does not need very many of them open at once. Then you move, and the instant a muscle fiber contracts, two separate messengers go rushing through that cell almost at the very same moment. The first is a flood of calcium. Every single time a muscle fires, calcium comes pouring through the cell in a sudden wave, and that flood is not only what makes the muscle contract in the first place, it also acts as a kind of alarm bell ringing through the whole cell. And part of what that alarm bell does is reach the drawer full of folded doors and say, "Wake up, get out here, we are working now." The second messenger moves more quietly, but matters just as much. A kind of internal fuel gauge sitting inside the cell that notices almost instantly that the muscle is spending energy faster than it was spending it a moment before. That fuel gauge sends its own separate signal, and that signal, too, walks doors up toward the surface. Two separate messengers, the sudden flood of calcium and the quiet tick of the fuel gauge, both triggered the moment you move, both arriving at that very same drawer, both saying essentially the same urgent thing in slightly different language. Open up. We need fuel now, not later. What I love most about this is that it means there are genuinely two separate roads leading to the very same door. One road begins far outside the muscle, back in the pancreas, and travels the long way through the blood carrying insulin along with it, the slower road, the one that depends on a hormone finding its way all the way to a waiting receptor. The other road begins right there inside the muscle itself, the instant it contracts, and it does not need to wait for anyone else to send anything, nor any permission, nor a single word from the watchman behind your stomach. Movement's road is always open, standing there ready every time you take a step, whether or not there happens to be a meal sitting in your blood at that particular moment. Now let me show you one particular muscle that scientists have come to genuinely admire, almost affectionately, because I think it will change how you feel about something as ordinary as simply standing at your own kitchen counter. Down in the back of your lower leg, tucked underneath the larger, more familiar calf muscle you can see and feel when you rise up on your toes, there is a smaller, quieter muscle called the soleus. You are almost certainly using it right now, or you were an hour ago, without ever once giving it a thought, because its entire job, its whole purpose in your body, is holding you upright. Every time you stand at the counter waiting for the kettle, every time you shift your weight in line at the pharmacy, that small, unglamorous muscle is working gently and continuously, and it barely ever seems to tire the way your arms or your thighs would after the same stretch of time. Researchers who have studied this particular muscle closely have found something genuinely wonderful tucked inside it. Because the soleus works at such a low, steady level nearly all day long, and because it leans so heavily on that insulin-free road we just walked down together, it turns out this little muscle can keep quietly sipping sugar out of your blood for hours, using remarkably little effort to do it. Hours. Not the brief, sharp spike you might picture from a hard workout at the gym, but a long, patient background hum of a muscle drawing sugar in again and again, simply because it is standing there doing the one job it has always known how to do. It is not the muscle anyone would ever pick out as impressive. Nobody admires their soleus. Nobody flexes it proudly in a mirror before they get in the shower. And yet, quietly, in the background of an entirely ordinary afternoon, it may be one of the hardest working little sugar doors anywhere in your body, letting fuel in almost the whole time you are simply upright and going about your day. If any of this is starting to make your own body feel a little less mysterious to you, a little more like a place you actually understand rather than a stranger you simply live inside, that is exactly why I make these. A quick like helps this find someone else who might need to hear it too. Now let me tell you why all of this matters more, not less, the older you get, because this is really the heart of why I wanted to sit down and tell you this whole story in the first place. As the years go by, that first road, the insulin road, tends to grow a little less smooth than it once was. The key still exists. Insulin still gets released from the pancreas, still travels through the blood, still finds its way to the muscle, same as always. But the lock itself, the receptor sitting on the surface of the muscle cell, can grow a bit stiffer with time, a bit slower to turn, so the very same amount of insulin does not open quite as many doors quite as quickly as it once did in a younger body. At the same time, muscle itself tends to shrink a little with age, a slow and gradual process researchers call sarcopenia, and a smaller muscle is, quite simply, a smaller pantry. Less muscle lining your arms and legs, fewer doors altogether, less total room to store the sugar that arrives after an ordinary meal. Put those two changes together, a stiffer key and a shrinking pantry, and you can see why, for a great many people, managing blood sugar quietly becomes more of a puzzle in their 60s and 70s than it ever felt like in their 30s or 40s. But here's the kind, honest twist I promised you back at the very beginning, the real reason I wanted to tell you this whole story today instead of some other one. That second road, the movement road, the one that opens the very same doors through contraction rather than through insulin, does not depend on that stiffening lock at all. It never did. That second road was never built on the pancreas, never built on the blood, never built on a hormone finding its way anywhere at all. It was built on motion itself, plain and simple, and motion is something your body can still offer at any age you happen to be sitting there listening to me right now. A muscle inside an 80-year-old body still floods with calcium the instant it contracts. It still notices its own fuel gauge tipping the moment it starts working. It still walks its own doors up to the surface entirely on its own, without ever once asking the stiffening lock for permission to do so. That road, unlike the other one, stays open. And that, quietly, is why a gentle walk after a meal does the small, remarkable thing it does. What the walk really is, underneath all of it, is your muscle reaching for its own private door. The one that has been standing there, wide open and waiting, since long before insulin ever entered this story at all. Some of the sugar that would otherwise sit a little longer in your blood gets pulled in instead through that second road, the road that never grew stiff with the years, the road that answers to nothing in the world except movement itself. That first slow lap around the block after dinner, that short walk to the mailbox and back, is not asking your muscle to perform some brand new trick it has never learned. It is only asking it to do the one thing it has been able to do since long before you can remember, open its own door, quietly, and let the sugar in. So let me put the whole picture back together for you, the way I love to do near the end of these. You sit down to a meal, and sugar begins rising in your blood, drifting through you the same way it was doing back at the very start of our time together today. Your pancreas notices, quiet watchman that it is, and sends insulin out along that first road, the slower road, traveling the long way through your circulation to knock on the muscle and ask it politely to open its doors. And your muscle, the largest, hungriest customer for that sugar anywhere in your entire body, answers, taking in the great bulk of it, burning some of it right away for whatever small task is at hand, and folding the rest into its own private pantry to wait for later. But sitting right alongside that first road the whole time, quietly, is a second one. Older in some ways, simpler in every way, the road that needs no hormone and asks no permission from anyone at all. The instant your muscle contracts, whether that is a single deliberate step across the kitchen or the soleus quietly holding you steady at the sink without you ever noticing, calcium floods the cell in a sudden wave. A fuel gauge inside notices the effort beginning, and those same doors slide open on their own. No knock required. Two separate roads leading to one and the same destination, and the second one never grows stiff, never depends on your age, never asks a single thing of you except that you move. That is the whole quiet machine, running underneath you right now, running while you sat here reading or listening to every word of this, and it will run again the very next time you simply stand up. Now, before I let you go today, I want to say something plainly, the way I always try to with you. I am not your doctor, and nothing I have told you here is meant to replace the person who actually is. What is happening in your own blood, your own particular muscle, your own particular body, is a personal thing, shaped by your history, your health, your medications, and details about you that only a doctor who can actually examine you would ever be able to properly weigh. If you have real questions about your own blood sugar, your own risk, your own numbers on a lab report, that conversation belongs with your doctor, someone who can look at you directly and know your whole story, not with a stranger talking to you through a screen. What I have tried to give you today is not a plan and not a set of instructions to follow. Understanding is all I hope to give you. The plain kind, the kind that once you actually have it, you get to carry around quietly with you for the rest of your life. So that is the whole picture, laid out whole in front of you. Right now, sugar is drifting through your blood exactly the way it was when we first sat down together at the start of all this. And the next time you push yourself up out of a chair, the next time you take even a few slow, unremarkable steps toward another room, thousands and thousands of tiny doors inside the muscles of your legs are going to slide open on their own, quietly pulling that sugar in off the current with no hormone required and no thought needed from you at all. So before you go, tell me something down in the comments. What part of the world are you listening from today? And what is the weather doing outside your window? And be honest with me, did any piece of this catch you off guard, the way it caught me the first time I really understood it? If sitting quietly with me and looking inside the human body is something you would like to go on doing, then subscribe and stay close by, and I will be here waiting the next time. The next time you stand up from wherever you are sitting right now and take those first few slow steps across the room, you will know a little more about the small, faithful machine working away just beneath your own skin, opening its doors, letting the sugar in, asking nothing of you but that you move.